Hello and welcome back to the American Unity Show. I'm your host, Greg Fanning. Today we're going to talk about the Virginia statewide elections. Today I'm going to talk about the gubernatorial races, and we're going to have the two Republican candidates for Lieutenant Governor and Attorney General come on and talk about their races on here. So we'll start with the governor's race. In the governor's race, you got Republican nominee, former Carlisle co-CEO Glenn Youngkin running against the Democrat nominee, former Governor Terry McAuliffe. In the lieutenant governor's race, we have former Delegate Winsome Sears running against Delegate Hala Ayala, and Delegate Jason Miyares running against Attorney General Mark Herring. Virginia has not elected a Republican to any statewide office since 2009 and has since lost majorities in both houses of the state legislature. And each of these elections have been directly affected by Northern Virginia and the Richmond suburbs. Today we're going to look at Virginia and which counties will decide this election. And these first I'm going to read the counties, and then I'm going to bring up a map here, and I'm going to show you which counties will be necessary to win. So the first county will be Prince William County, Manassas City, Manassas Park, Fairfax City, Falls Church, Arlington, Alexandria City, and Fairfax County in Loudoun County. Those few counties, those are Northern Virginia. So when I say Northern Virginia, those are the counties that matter. Those are the counties that will decide who wins, essentially. And another big contributor to who will win will be the Richmond suburbs of Henrico and Chesterfield, which have gone back and forth between Republican and Democrat over the years, and most recently have gone Democrat and went for Ralph Northam in 2017, but went for Bob McDonnell in 2009. Some other counties that are toss-up and have switched have been Chesterfield, Suffolk, Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, Sussex, Albemarle, Prince Edward, Brunswick, Lexington, Staunton, Montgomery, Radford, Danville, Northampton County, and Winchester. Those are the counties, in my opinion, are the toss-up counties, and if you win those counties, you can do a Bob McDonnell win and win a statewide office, which has not been done in a very long time, like I said above. But the real question will be who will win Northern Virginia and the Richmond suburbs. But the key to winning this will be losing by less in Fairfax County. That is a majority. The other counties matter, Richmond and the other counties I mentioned in Northern Virginia, those all do matter. But the key to this will be losing by less in Fairfax County. We'll see what happens. With correct messaging, we will be able to bring out the low propensity voters, some of the minority communities who don't necessarily vote, of Nova, independents and soft Democrats. But it depends. And the race is statistically tied. I just saw a poll that showed Terry McAuliffe up 9, but that was the Hill. I don't know if they're accurate or not. I've seen polling that shows Youngkin up 4, but it's within the margin of error, and it is a dead heat. So it's anybody's race. Youngkin could be governor, McAuliffe could be governor, and we'll see what happens. But that's the governor's race, and we'll see what happens today. But today we're going to talk about the we're going to have guests to talk about Lieutenant Governor and Attorney General's races. And I'm not going to do the talking. I'm sure you're all glad to hear that. I'm going to let the two candidates talk. Now we have Delegate Jason Miyares, who was a Commonwealth attorney and is a Republican nominee for Attorney General of Virginia. I do want to point out Jason does represent a district in Virginia Beach that votes Democratic, and he's still able to win it, which shows he's a very good candidate to win statewide office, because he has the ability to flip a Democratic-leaning district, which is imperative to winning statewide office. So I just want to point out that Glenn Youngkin is a former businessman, wonderful candidate to be a governor. He's got a business experience. He knows how to run a business. Winsome Sears, she has a very good minority outreach program going. She understands the minority community. She's a proud member of it. She's a Jamaican American. Former delegate, Marine Corps veteran. She's a veteran, a small businesswoman. Delegate Miyares, Winsome and Jason are both good friends of mine. Winsome won also in a very liberal leading district back in the day in 2003. She won that. Both Winsome and Jason have a very good background in winning Democratic leaning districts as Republicans, and while promoting their proud Republican beliefs and conservative beliefs. So we're glad to have Delegate Jason Miyares on the program.
Peter, Lansing, and my passion about this country and my love of freedom. They have to know a little bit where I came from. So, my mom fled communist Cuba at age 19, literally with the clothes on her back and not knowing where her next meal was going to come from. And that gives me incredible appreciation. I tell my daughters all the time, gratitude is one of the most underrated of all human traits. And I have such gratitude for the fact that I could live in this amazing country and breathe the air as a free American. So I'm a fantastic lover of both this country, our Constitution, and the freedoms that we all enjoy. And that's a little bit about my background and my passion. And ultimately why I decided to run for Attorney General was seeing a lot of these kind of far-left policies being pushed in Richmond that I think were making Virginians less safe and less secure, and I decided to get off the sidelines and run for Attorney General.
Wow, that's great. It's very true. A lot of Americans forget that trait you talked about. So it's great to hear that. That's important to you, because we need more. I think we need more of that. My second question to you is, tell us about. I think you told us a little bit about this in the previous question. But what specifically encouraged you to run? Like, was there a specific policy?
Well, I mean, it was a collection. I mean, as you know, 2 years ago, one party rule took over in Richmond, and it is a very, very far left party. Today's Democratic Party in Virginia is not your parents' or grandparents. It's shifted significantly far to the left. It used to be that the Virginia Democratic Party was actually more to the center than the national Democratic Party. That's actually flipped. I would say that most of the individuals getting elected now in Virginia are even farther to the left than what we're seeing in Washington. And in this case, they pushed a lot of, and you've seen that a lot. I can't tell the number of people that have come up to me that are supporting me that consider themselves old Chuck Robb Democrats that are now supporting myself or supporting Glenn Youngkin. Sheriff Schuler of Smith County, who was a Democrat, has endorsed me. And as he said, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me, and they left me because of this far left, liberal policies, these anti-police, anti-law enforcement rhetoric policies, the defund police movement, and all of that. And so if you have any sense of just how far the party has shifted, you just have to don't look any further than the Police Benevolent Association. The Police Benevolent Association represents thousands of police officers in Virginia. 8 years ago, they endorsed both Terry McAuliffe and my opponent, Mark Herring. And then this year, neither Terry McAuliffe or Mark Herring or even the Democratic nominee for lieutenant governor, none of them were even willing to meet with the Police Benevolent Association.
That's horrible.
Even though 8 years prior they had endorsed them, and it was because it would so anger their far left, extreme left Democratic base. And so I think that demonstrates just how much McAuliffe Herring and the Democratic Party has shifted. And so being in the General Assembly and seeing a lot of these policies over the last 2 years, as somebody who had been a prosecutor, was infuriating. I like to say common sense isn't very common in Richmond these days. It's not common sense. It's not common sense to reduce from a felony to a misdemeanor assaulting a police officer. It's not common sense to end, as they did earlier this year, the mandatory reporting requirement of sexual assault in schools. It's not common sense to try to end all mandatory minimums for drug dealers, not drug users, drug dealers, including second offense dealing drugs to a child at a school or a bus stop. It's not common sense to say we're going to get 50% off your sentence automatically if you're a convicted child pornographer. And everything I just described is not just rhetoric. That's actual legislation that's been pushed and put advanced by this far left liberal monopoly we have in Richmond. And I think voters right now in Virginia want to end the monopoly. They want something different. And so if we're going to change Richmond, we're definitely going to have to change the leadership we have in Richmond. And that's a lot of what I decided to get off the sidelines and run for Attorney General. Wow,
I was aware it was bad, but wow, that is real bad. That's that's really bad.
Try serving in the General Assembly and being on the Courts of Justice Committee and seeing these bills come through your committee, and you just shake your head. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, might get up and just go crazy after that for a while. But well, that leads me to my next question here is, So if I would like to say when you win, but let's just, for the sake of this, if you win, what would you do specifically as Attorney General to help turn the state around, in your opinion?
Well, I'd say the first thing I would do is investigate this parole board. I mean, if you follow, again, if your listeners don't realize that leadership matters, if they don't think election matters, you just don't have to look any further than the McCullough parole board. The majority of people appointed on this parole board are appointed by Terry McCullough. And when George Allen was governor, when Jim Gilmore was governor, and when Bob Dole was governor, they put victims on that parole board, either individuals that have lost loved ones, that have been murdered, or people that have been victims of violent crime, to make sure the voices of the victim's perspective, is not forgotten. What has happened is Terry McCullough started placing these far-left ideologues on the parole board, and they were letting out cop killers, murderers, and rapists out, sometimes with decades on their sentence. Some of these people had life sentences without the possibility of parole. They would let them out early, and they violated the law to do it. The law of Virginia is clear. You have to notify the victims before you let out these felons. They failed to do so. You have to notify the prosecuting attorney. They failed to do so. And a brave whistleblower came forward and said, listen, the parole board is letting out some of the most violent criminals back in our streets, and they're breaking the law to do it. And then what did Mark Herring do? He did nothing. He sat on the sidelines. He stood silent. He's the Attorney General of Virginia, the Attorney General of the entire Commonwealth. He's also the Attorney General who advises the parole board. And you had 5 former Attorney Generals with over 20 years of experience that have said that any Attorney General that finds a state agency that's breaking the law, that is violating the rules and regulations, you, A, have an obligation to advise them not to, and B, you have an obligation, if need be, to take them to court. And Mark Herring stood by and did nothing. And so what you've seen with this parole board, you have people like David Simpkins. David Simpkins had not 12 felonies, not 24 felonies, not 3 felonies on his record, not 4 felonies on his record, but he had 56 prior felony convictions, right?
Wow.
And almost as many felony convictions as Mark Herring is old. And you know what happened?
What happened?
The parole board let him out. They let him out 46 years early. And you know what he did with his 56th chance to get his life straight? He committed his 57th felony. He put on a ski mask. He walked into a convenience store. He held a gun up to the head of a young clerk. And he got his 57th felony. You know what the prosecutor noted in that case? David Simpkins should have never, ever been in a position to ever harm another Virginian again. But he was, because this parole board, the McCullough parole board, let him out, and Mark Herring stood by and did nothing to stop it. And I could give you case after case, but that is the very first thing I'm going to do, is to investigate this parole board. I know Glenn Youngkin's going to fire them, and my job is to investigate. So Virginians know I think it's one of the worst scandals we've ever seen.
Wow.
It is horrific that these people are getting let out. You had one individual that literally abducted and murdered a 15-year-old girl, and he got a life sentence without the possibility of parole, and they let him out. And he let him out earlier this year. He's still in his 40s. So, you have those cases like that, and I tell you what, you got another individual, got another life. He got not 1, not 2, but 3 life sentences without parole for the home and rape and murder of a 78-year-old grandmother back on the streets as we speak right now. Mark Herring did nothing to stop it. So it is a huge issue. It's outrageous. And that's a lot of and that's why public safety has become a big issue. I mean, the murder rate in Virginia is the highest it's been in over 2 decades. Virginians are upset and they want to change.
Yeah, I remember I was volunteering for Ed Gillespie, and I remember one of the negative attack ads we did on Northam was, there was going to be, he was very light on crime, and I just remember those ads. It's hard to remember now, but I just remember that there was all that going around. And I remember after he took office, there was a story that came, I think in Alexandria, where I used to live, and there was this guy who was let out on parole, and he killed a woman.
Carla Dominguez. He got released on bond. He did a breaking and entering and attempted rape of Carla Dominguez, and he was arrested. and a left-wing judge let him out. And he said he let him out because Governor Northam had released new bond guidances on how to deal with prisoners during COVID. No bracelet, no monitoring device. This is a violent felony. They let him out. As soon as they let him out, he broke back into her apartment and murdered her in cold blood.
Wow.
It was tragic, absolutely tragic.
Yeah.
And so when I say there's a criminal first, victim last mindset right now, that's exactly what you're seeing. And not just with the far left liberal monopoly in Richmond. You've seen it with these Commonwealth attorneys. The Fairfax Commonwealth attorney, Toscano, he's a coward.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't use words lightly, as you know. That is a coward. You want to know why I know he's a coward? Because this guy will run in front of a TV camera every chance he gets. But when it got leaked out that he was taking a child rapist, somebody who had raped and sodomized a 5-year-old girl and another 6-year-old girl, and rather than prosecute this individual to the fullest extent of the law, he dropped some of the charges because there were mandatory minimums involved, which would have given this monster, and this defendant was a monster, a life sentence, right? He dropped it and gave the person, reached a plea deal, didn't even bother to try the case, reached a plea deal of 17 years, which means that this monster is going to be eligible for geriatric parole in 10 years. 10 years back on the street for somebody who raped a 5-year-old girl. And when it happened, this brave prosecutor in Fairfax, who's so brave about going in front of, he comments on every single media post and runs in front of a camera, you know what he did? He went and hid. And he had a spokesman go out and answer the questions of the media. Dang. So that should tell you how the people of Fairfax have been so ill-served and why they're the recall. So, one of the things that I'm going to push for, and Glenn Youngkin has agreed, is a legislative change. The Attorney General has original jurisdiction in all computer crimes. They do a lot of joint prosecutions with U.S. attorneys' offices, and they handle every single criminal appeal. That's why a lot of people refer to as the top law enforcement official in the state. But one thing I'm pushing is a legislative change. It says, listen, for any Commonwealth attorney that refuses to prosecute a child predator, a sex predator, I'm going to have a change that says if you refuse to do your job, the Attorney General has the right to prosecute and have original jurisdiction. If you fail to do your job, my job will do the job for you. That's what's going on. And it's outrageous. It's what we're having. It's why people are so frustrated with what they're seeing. It's why we desperately need a check and balance. And my goal is to bring a check and balance that's so needed right now.
Yeah, that's something I remember. I was working for Lance, and we were handing out stuff for him, and I was working with the Kirk Cox people at the time, where I was handing out stuff, talking to them, and there's these ladies going around, signing the recall Toscano petitions, and they were getting a lot of signatures. So I think, a lot of people, more than just Republicans, are really pissed off with Steve Toscano. And I remember that I worked for DJ Jordan also, and I remember we had these conversations in our office about just, the money just pouring in for these Commonwealth attorneys. I mean, it just poured in, and we're like, who invests this much money in a little race like that? I mean, I'm sure they're, to the average person.
Well, you see all of this. You've seen all of this out-of-state money that has come in. I've raised over 90, well north of 90% of all the money I've raised in my campaign has come from Virginians.
That's awesome.
Or Virginia businesses. And if you look at Mark Herring, I think it's like 38%, 40%. And that's what we've seen. You've seen these outside groups that don't have to live with the consequences of their decisions that in these elections, that then go in and vote for, a variety of these, or they pour money in these variety of these offices, but they're not Virginians. It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem that happens. And so, our goal right now is for every Virginian that's frustrated, for every Virginian that's turned on the news or the radio and has been frustrated by what they're seeing, the direction we're coming, now's the time to let their voices be heard. And, if you're frustrated with what you're seeing in Washington, if you're frustrated, you can't wait till next year to vote, but you sure as that can voice your displeasure in Virginia. If you're frustrated with what you're seeing in Richmond, boy, leadership matters, election matters. The world is run by those that show up, so go vote. Yeah,
that's true. Well, this seems like a massive problem here, and I think the only thing in between the only thing standing in between this being fixed is, getting elected. And I know there's, not one Republican has won the statewide race in 2009. So my question to you is, and this will be my final question, I think, what is the how are you going to win this? With such a bad, track record, Republicans have a hard time winning. It's demoralizing. What can you do?
I think sometimes in politics it's 50% message, 50% messenger. Sometimes when, we've had candidates who maybe have a good message but aren't the best perfect messenger, or a good messenger, but their message gets drowned out by kind of what's happening at the national stage. But I will say this: there's an old saying, there's no education in a second kick from a mule, and I think a lot of Virginians are frustrated with what they're seeing. And listen, what I am shocked at are people like I mentioned, Sheriff Schuler, who's a Democrat. He's not the only one. Democratic Commonwealth. I've had two different Democratic Commonwealth attorneys that have endorsed as well. So you're seeing a lot of middle of the road voters that have said, you know what? We're really, really frustrated. This is not what we signed up for. I think Terry McAuliffe getting up and saying, the joke is the quiet part out loud. He said what he's been thinking but didn't want to say. And when he said parents have no right to have any educational say in their children. Well, by the way, that's in the Virginia Constitution. The Virginia Constitution is explicit about parentals have a fundamental right to the upbringing of their children. So it just shows he's ignorant of the Virginia Constitution that he wants to swear to defend. And so what we're seeing everywhere we go is such a coalition. We've seen a coalition of always Trumpers, never Trumpers, moderates, independent voters, frustrated Democrats. I had one individual who came up at an event that said, me and my family who had voted Democrat for years, and we can't do it anymore. It's gone so far to the left, and they're with us. And so what you're seeing is people that are frustrated. They know that, my joke with Terry McAuliffe is the original wasn't that good. We always know the sequel's not as good as the original, right? So we know what we get with him, but we know with Glenn Youngkin, he's a dynamic leader. He's a visionary leader. I think he would be one of the most impactful, positive governors that we've ever had in Virginia. I think people are hungry for a change. I mean, they're seeing the headlines of how Ford Motor Plant are opening huge facilities in Kentucky, Tennessee, and North Carolina. They completely bypassed Virginia.
Wow.
Don't think for a second we're not competing with 49 other states for jobs. And guess what? Our right to work law is now on the block. For people who don't know what right to work is, it means for me to keep my job, I don't have to be forced to join a union. And that may seem common sense. It may seem like, well, that just seems fair. Well, unfortunately, in certain states, they don't have that. For you to keep your job, you have to join a union. They take money out of your paycheck every month that goes to their big, rich, liberal union bosses. You have to use it. There's a reason why Terry McAuliffe has gotten literally hundreds of thousands of dollars from unions is because he wants to repeal right to work. In fact, he said back on April 30th that right to work, repeal of right to work got to his death, he would vote to economic boom for the state of North Carolina in their history, because you hear a giant sucking sound of jobs leaving Virginia and going across the border to North Carolina.
Wow. Just finish up what you were saying.
Yeah, well, I just,
there.
Everywhere we go, we're seeing so many people, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, are frustrated with this far left liberal monopoly we have in Richmond. They desperately want to check and balance. They want us to defend the police, not to fund the police, give the police the tools to do their jobs. They're outraged. The parole board is letting out cop killers, murderers, and rapists out back on the street, which have had life sentences without parole. And so that's really what's at stake right now. And so the choice, we're kind of labeling it for Virginians. If you want somebody who's been trained as a politician, Mark Herring's your candidate. If you want somebody who's been trained as a prosecutor and wants to stand with law enforcement, is that proudly has the endorsement of the Police Benevolent Association, the Fraternal Order Police, and both Democrat, Independent, and Republican sheriffs, then I'm your candidate. And I think that's what's at stake. We're excited about where we are. We're super excited about the race, and we're ready to just bring this thing home.
Awesome. Well, that's great to hear. Best of luck to you, Glenn, and Winsome, and yourself. And hopefully it turns out, because it seems like Virginia is one of those states that needs it. But it was great talking to you, Jason. Hope everything's going well with you.
Thanks so much. Thanks.
All right.
Appreciate it. God bless. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
While we can sit here and complain, nothing will change unless we all step up and decide to get active, whether that be running for office, making an alternative company to companies you don't like, or fighting for free and fair press, or exposing the hypocrisy of the democratic socialists. Everyone has a role to fight this, and if you don't, who will? Edmund Burke once famously said, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. So don't be the good men that did nothing. Let's take our country back together. Subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram so you don't miss another episode of our show that fights to expose Marxism and return to the Constitution. I also do want to point out that on our website we have comprehensive policy plans in a blog form and different ways you can get active in your community. So I encourage you to check out our website at Unite Coalition -1 at myfreewebsite.com, and we'll have that in the description below. I think I got that right, but we'll have that in the description below. So if you live in Virginia, make sure you get out and vote for Glenn Youngkin, Winsome Sears, and Jason Miyares. And if you live in Virginia, you're delegate candidate too. And thanks again. We'll be back here next week for freedom. Have an awesome day.